All right, that is going to roll us into the interagency treatment dashboard, the tracker. And I want to introduce Dr. Alan Telham for coming up and providing this presentation today. I am happy and proud to announce that Alan is CAL FIRE's newest Assistant Deputy Director of Climate and Energy, previously with California Air Resources Board. Alan worked with members here and members in the community and in the audience for monitoring, reporting, and assessment working group to work on the challenges inherent in bringing multiple agencies data into one system, which has been a feat in and of itself. It is important for me to note, sorry, Alan, I'm going to call you out again, that Alan should be off right now, but this just shows his commitment to the work he is doing, and happy to congratulate you on a new baby, Quinn Alexander Telham. Congratulations to you, and thank you for being here. Alan?
Thanks. Yeah, thank you for that kind introduction, Chief Tyler. Yeah, so I also want to acknowledge that, I just had a son born, and I wanted to acknowledge that because I want to say thank you to Forrest and Kristen and other people from the task force who've really stepped up over the last week and a half and really brought this dashboard release in for a landing while I've been taking some time away and spending that time with my family. I am here today, though. I couldn't pass this moment up, I think, to a little bit of chagrin of my wife. But she's been very gracious in letting me be here for this today. This is the beta release of this dashboard. We're not done yet. It's a work in progress, but we did want to show you the work that we've done so far because we do think we're at a point where it has a lot of value for all of the reasons that people have talked about here today so far. I'm a little overwhelmed by all the hype from all of you. I feel like maybe at the end of this presentation, there should be like a balloon drop and some confetti happening. I don't think that's queued up, although, never know. So we've been talking about this for a while. As Sam mentioned, it's been at least 18 months. I think I've been working on this for a couple of years at this point. We've talked to you in the past about the goals of this tracking system, what we're trying to do, and reiterate them here. As a number of people up here on the dais have mentioned, one of the goals is to support transparency so that everyone is clear on what we're doing, combined state and federal governments in California. So you can really, I think hold us accountable and also see where the projects are happening around you in your part of the country or your part of the state. The second goal is to facilitate planning, support fire suppression operations. That's been mentioned here already as well. Obviously, if you're going to be putting new projects on the landscape, it's really useful to see where your partners are doing work in the forests and landscape around you. We also want to provide data for assessing benefits and costs beyond acres treated. As Patrick mentioned during his director's report, that's really important to have these acres treated numbers, but it's more important to go past that and really understand what our effect is on the landscape. And so that's really driven some of the data requirements that we've had for this tracking system and some of the need for spatial data in the system and the need for a good level of detail. So we can really utilize this information to understand where we're going with our progress in creating a more resilient landscape. And then finally, we want to track progress towards the state and federal acreage targets that have received a lot of attention over the last few years. So I don't know if it's live now, but later this afternoon, there will be a new part of the task force webpage at wildfiretaskforce.org, which will show you a link and some other supporting documentation to the treatment dashboard. Right now, this treatment dashboard shows the acres of work done in calendar year 2022 from active and complete treatments. It's state data, it's federal data, and it's data from the timber industry as well. I'm going to run through some demonstrations. So if you go to the webpage now, you'll see a few different links up there. There's a how-to page. There's a tab for activity data and a tab for footprint data, different charts and maps. We'll walk through all of that here today during this presentation. So I just mentioned activity data and footprint data. I haven't really told you what those are yet. I'm going to run you through a little exercise here so you can really understand what we're talking about and what these data mean as you explore the dashboard. So, imagine a hypothetical treatment. This is right over by Auburn, North Fork American River. There's the road over to Forest Hill. So you can imagine there's a treatment area there. Maybe it's a land parcel, 70 acres that's going to be treated right next to that road there. Then 2022, maybe there was 40 acres of mastication work done there. And there's an additional 30 acres planned for this year. Didn't get done in 2022. And so the amount of activity that happened there, so that the amount of work that happened there is 40 acres. And the geographic footprint of that work was also 40 acres. And the next example, I'm going to show you how those things can be different. So imagine just upstream from that, there's a larger area. Maybe it's 200-acre parcel over there. There's 2 different activities that happened over the whole breadth of that parcel. Maybe 200 acres of thinning and followed by a 200-acre broadcast burn that happened in 2022. So both of those things happened on the same piece of land, the same 200 acres. So the amount of activity acres would be 400 because we had to go to that piece of land twice to do 2 separate activities. That's extra funding that's required, extra staff time, extra resources, potentially, extra permitting and other work as well. But the geographic footprint is only 200 acres. So we only actually touched 200 acres. We think it's important to talk about both of those metrics when we're talking about our achievements in the state of California. It's really important to know the activity data because that's really tied to the funding. It's tied to the efforts, tied to the crews and the resources that we need in order to get this done. But it's also really important to be transparent about how much of the geography are we actually touching in the state of California? How much of the landscape is being put into a better condition through this work? So here's an overview of the activity part of the dashboard. So you can see there are 2 different charts here. There's a map and there's a table. I realize for those of you in the back, it's probably hard to read some of the text on here, but I'll walk you through that and we can look through what's there. So activity category talks about the different types of activities. Activity acres talks about the ownership, who owns the land where that activity is taking place. And that table summarizes by entity, state, and federal, how much work those entities are doing on the ground. So just walk you through that and how this works. So all of these features are also interactive. So you could click on something like mechanical and hand fuels reduction, that purple box, and it'll filter the map and filter the table and the graph to show you just mechanical and hand fuels reduction. Or you can click on federal ownership and see what's happening on federal lands. Or you could click on CAL FIRE and see where is CAL FIRE doing work. And you can even add these filters together. So where is CAL FIRE doing prescribed fire work on state lands? And that filters the map to show just those projects. One of the ways that this dashboard is in beta is in terms of the data that we have. This is a new system. Some of the organizations that are contributing data to here have had data reporting systems in place for years. Forest Service has had the FACTS database for a long time. CAL FIRE's had CalMapper is very well established. Department of Interior has had NIFPORs and other data systems to track its work. But some of the different state agencies are new to this level of detail in terms of their reporting. So we're missing some information still. We're expecting to get more information. If you are an astute observer and understanding all of your state of California governance, you notice there's probably some agencies that are missing here that you expected to see, like Wildlife Conservation Board or Sierra Nevada Conservancy. It's not because those agencies aren't doing work. They're doing great work on the ground, but we're still in the process of gathering data for them. And a good example of why this is grant agreements. A lot of the work that the state does is through grant agreements. If you want this level of detailed reporting from your grantees, that has to be written into the grant guidelines. So there can be a lag between when you develop a system, create rules for the reporting, and when you actually get that information from your grantees. It's hard to go back in time and say, hey, grantee, we know we gave you this grant 2 years ago, or we know you just finished this grant. Can you tell us in this very can you provide us this detailed spatial information about where you're doing treatments and when you did the treatments and things like that? So it'll take us a little time to build that and reach a level where we're getting a full accounting of all the work that's happening across the landscape in California. But we're making progress. Next thing I want to talk about is some of the different activity categories. So we've lumped the work that's happening on the landscape in California into some different bins. There is mechanical and hand fuels reduction, there's prescribed fire, targeted grazing, tree planting, and timber harvest. That's not to say, I particularly want to point out for timber harvest, does not mean that is all of the timber harvest that is happening in the state of California. That is the subset of timber harvest that we think provides the landscape resilience values across the state of California. So you can click on a link in the dashboard and it'll show you all the different individual activities that are within those categories. So you can understand a little bit more what is the data that we're showing you in particular. One thing I want to point out is timber company data. If you're an astute observer and you saw that map flash up on the screen, you may have noticed the little pile of points off the coast there. That is not the Farallon Islands. It is data that we have from the timber industry, from Cal Forests. The data that we have is non-spatial for the timber industry, so we just wanted it to be a part of the dashboard, but we didn't want to put it in any particular region. We wanted to note the contribution the industry is making, but we didn't want to say this is happening in one spot or the other in particular. Thanks. Yes. So I think the coolest feature of this map and the most transparent feature of the map is that you can actually go and zoom in. You can make these individual panels bigger or smaller. We can look at some of the individual points here and you can zoom in and see the actual polygons on there. If you zoom out, you can click on an individual point. It'll bring us some attributes to talk about what type of work was done, who did the work, when the work was completed. We can zoom in a little bit further. I think it's going to show us a spot a little uphill from Grass Valley, a treatment that CAL FIRE put in. You can see if you look closely, there's some overlapping lines. So there's multiple treatments that have gone in here. You can click it open. You can see this is probably not in the back, but there's 4 different treatments that are layered on here. There's a couple of mastication treatments, a broadcast burn, that are all sort of overlapping and occurring within this larger area. I want to move over quickly and talk about the footprint data. You know, again, there's those industry points that are off in the ocean. They're not in a region. They're in their own region called private industrial for now. But you can look at the data just based on the footprints. Because this is a GIS analysis, you lose some of the information about who is doing the work and what work is happening. Because if you stack multiple treatments on top of each other, all we're seeing is that land was treated. We're not seeing what particular treatment it was or who different that treatment is. We're just saying that land was treated by somebody. So these figures and charts or thing up here are all based on just the geography of the land, where it is, what type of vegetation might be on there and things like that. And similarly, you can zoom in on this map and look at some of the attributes there as well to see, the land ownership. One thing that I didn't get to with the activity map is those little buttons in the top right side of that map show the legend and also different data layers. So you could look at Forest Service lands within the treatment tracker. You could look at areas of WUI. You can look at counties. You can look at legislative districts and see where all these treatments are across the landscape. I want to point your attention back to the landing page. So this will be available, I think, later this afternoon. There's some supporting documentation there. We're showing our work to the extent we can by providing documentation, the methods, how we're converting the data, how we're bringing in the Forest Service data, how we're bringing in BLM data, how we're bringing in data from the various California Natural Resources Agency departments and conservancies. You can download the data there. There's a feature service. There's a geodatabase. I think in the future, there'll be a table of data in a CSV form. There's also some FAQs on that page to talk about things like, how is this different than other viewers that are out there, such as the CalMap or CAL FIRE Fuels Reduction Viewer. So you can understand that this is not all the same. There are some differences in how the data are displayed and processed. Okay, some next steps. One thing we want to do is have a public workshop. Now that you've seen this and we'll have a chance to play around with it. We want to get your input on what it looks like and what functionalities are there. how we can change it, how we can make it better, how we can serve you better. There will be a link on the dashboard landing page on task force for you to send us some feedback as well. So if you can't go to that public workshop that we're going to hold, feel free to send us your comments. We still have work to do. We want to get beyond this beta version. We want to improve the data from the state agencies that we're getting. We need to improve the data that we're getting from timber industry. We need to get better data on planned treatments. Everything that you're seeing right here so far is just completed work and some active work as well. Doesn't really look forward very well. We ideally want to expand to tribes, local governments, and NGOs as well, so that we can see a more complete picture of what is happening across the landscape in California. In the future, we're planning to update this dashboard quarterly, and then we're hoping in 2024 to have our first real official annual summary of everything that's happening out on the landscape in California. So with that, any questions?
Thank you, Alan, for the presentation. Definitely appreciate that. Before I offer any comments, I want to go to the executive committee. Any comments from the executive committee or questions for Alan? All right. Patrick, any questions?
Just a couple more things to emphasize. Thank you, Alan. That was terrific. We do really, of course, want your comments. There's no perfect way to do this. There's no perfect way to establish categories. We've lumped everything into 5 categories. We could have them in 6 or 12 or 20. There's a lot of other choices that were made in designing this, but the whole point is for it to be accessible and user-friendly. So please let us know, contact Alan, contact us, and we were likely to hold some kind of a workshop, I'm guessing, in the future to try to get more specific comments, but we definitely want folks' input. We do plan to make this an annual thing. The last point I want to make, which is also really important, is obviously with 2022, you're not getting trend data. And the question everybody's asking is, great, that's what you did in 2022, but is that an increase? Is that a decrease? Where are you? We're obviously aware of that. As Alan said, for most agencies, we simply don't have the data going back for those previous years, or if we do, it's point data, it's not spatial data, so we really can't sort it out. Having said that, CAL FIRE and the Forest Service do have good historical data. So what we're going to try to do over time is to showcase that data so that you're aware of the trends. CAL FIRE, for example, 4 or 5 years ago was at something like 30 to 40,000 acres treated. They've tripled that given the money that's been invested. We want to be able to tell that story as well. The same thing is going to be true with the Forest Service. As this national money starts flowing, their numbers are going to go up. So it's going to be an interesting challenge to showcase annual numbers, but also showcase trends. So we look forward to hearing more from you on how we can best do that.
All right, thank you. Sherry, do you have any thoughts?
Thanks, Alan. I know you and your team have spent a lot of time on this, so thank you for asking the hard questions, and congratulations, because this is one of the first states that I'm aware of that's been able to put together federal and state data in a way that's comparable. That's really hard to do. So great work in trying to get all this put together. And it's exciting to see so much of it coming from others who want to contribute their successes too. I think this really is showcasing where the important work is. I think it gives us a lens to the future. How can we work together in those areas where there's shared interests? When we can start to see things in a spatial context, it's going to be really valuable. So I guess from your perspective, what do you see in addition to those next steps that might be most beneficial for others to contribute toward so that we can make some of those planning decisions coming forward?
It's a great question. I first want to defer a little bit and say, or just acknowledge the collaboration, as you pointed out. We wouldn't be here without the help that I've received from the Forest Service, from CAL FIRE, before I was in CAL FIRE, and just any number of different partners across the state, the federal government as well. This would not have happened without a lot of good interagency cooperation. And I think that's because people see the value in understanding this information and putting it all in one place. Next steps, we need to get better. We need to get faster at having this information. It's great that we have this for 2022, but if we want to put this in the hands of firefighters, we want to put this in the hands of planners, we really need to get faster at the reporting, and we also need to be able to look ahead more and have better data on planned projects. You know, to be honest, having spatial data on planned projects is not really a strength of many organizations within the task force. It's a data gap, and it's I think a data gap that we're going to need to solve, and we are working to solve in the task force going forward. But that I think is a really crucial next step in improving this dashboard and tracking system as a whole.
Sam, did you have a thought?
Just quickly, again, I think I would emphasize what I said earlier, and it's so critical to get this out, especially in the hands of local jurisdictions who could actually benefit significantly in both ways. So I think whatever we can in all of our agencies, and I think our task force as well, we should do as much as we can to get it out to local jurisdictions so that they can start using it, but also, you know, it's a two-way process, so we can get feedback from them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We need to figure out how we can involve local governments, and we're, you know, having conversations, for instance, with, you know, the RCD of California to try to, is there a way to collect information from all of the RCDs across California and feed that into this database? I imagine we capture a lot of their work already because we're capturing the work that they're doing that's funded by the state and the federal government. But we know they're also doing work that's funded by other sources as well. And I think it'd be great to have that full picture.
All right, we're coming up on time, but I'm not going to let Alan off the hook quite yet. Most important slide is the next steps. It is where we go from here. So Alan, can you help those online and those in the room with providing feedback? Where do they provide the feedback to?
Well, we're going to have a public meeting. We're not sure yet when or where that's going to happen. Presumably there'll be an online option for that. I can't imagine that we would not have a way to have online option, because this is an issue and data that touch all corners of the state, and people can't necessarily make it down to Sacramento. And as I mentioned earlier, there is going to be a feedback tool on the website. Forrest is nodding his head yes. It's not there yet, but when you go to the dashboard landing page on the task force website, there will be a tool, a little link that you can fill out a form and give us some feedback. And as Patrick mentioned, we would really love your feedback on this. We spent a lot of time on this, and as Patrick mentioned, we did have to make a lot of decisions. Decisions may not have been the perfect decisions. And so we'd love to hear your input on that.
Richard.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. Really appreciate the presentation. I know we've had a number of discussions at the task force too about metrics and kind of looking at outcome based assessments over time, and just wondering if your dashboard has some capability to add in additional metrics as we have decisions on what we want to track to assist longer term resilience and everything.
I mean, it could. I don't know that this is ultimately going to be the vehicle for that. We have other tools that the task force is building, like the regional resource kits and Plantscape and all of the stuff that Patrick mentioned in the data hub. And those may ultimately be better places for that, because they are sort of broader based and can be more integrative. But I think we definitely want to have that type of information as somewhere in the task force and the task force products.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Perfect. And I know we're over time. But is the audience, anybody in the audience, does somebody or anybody have a question for Alan at this moment? All right, hearing none, that keeps me on schedule. So thank you, Alan, and congratulations again.